And I now give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Madam President, we thank Mrs. Nakamitsu for presenting the reports of the Director General of the OPCW as well as the fact-finding mission in Syria. The report of the Director General regarding the July decision of the Executive Council was not a revelation for anyone. It predictably accuses the Syrian Arab Republic of non-compliance with that decision. And this outcome was also predictable from the very beginning. It was obvious that this decision was impossible to comply with from the get-go, and its only goal is to make Damascus look bad in the eyes of the international community. After all, who has time to get to the bottom of the fact that that decision demands something that is impossible, even in theory, from Syria, namely, within 90 days to declare non-declared chemical weapons and alleged related production facilities, the very ones that were destroyed and confirmation of which was received. Not a single OPCW inspection since 2013 has been able to demonstrate the opposite. We have repeatedly expressed our detailed criticism of that decision, as well as the IIT report on the incident in Lithuania in 2017, which was at its basis. That very decision was roughly pushed through the Executive Council with a minimal number of votes. The IIT report is politicized, factually unreliable, and technically unconvincing, which cannot claim to be any sort of expert investigation. And even that pseudo-report, when it touches upon the military situation in Latamina and Hama in March and April 2017, comes to the conclusion that there was no need to even hypothetically use chemical weapons by Syrian armed forces. And here we agree with the authors of the report. Back then, the Syrian army was successfully progressing in Hama province and had managed to restore control over most of its territory. There was no reason for the Syrian Arab Republic, even in theory, to use chemical weapons and draw fire unto itself. Well, logic has been long absent in the arsenal of our Western colleagues. Otherwise, they would have to admit that conclusions regarding the loudest cases of alleged use of chemical weapons, which are unjustifiably attributable to Russia, to Syria, and recently to Russia, lie far outside the bounds of common sense. It's telling that back in July we were hearing appeals to the Council to punish Syria long before this report of the Director General. So, in other words, it was very clear to them that Syria did not stand a single chance of complying with the Executive Council decision of July. We hope that the other members of the Security Council will take a critical approach to what's going on and will refuse to participate in this farce and this state incident, which threatens to truly undermine the authority of the Council. Last time we drew attention to the fact that in the letter transmitting the monthly report on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2118, the Secretary General suddenly began using the language of the aforementioned biased and unrealistic Executive Council decision about the need to bring to accountability all those who use chemical weapons, and that purportedly the unity of the Council is necessary in order to comply with this urgent obligation. Regrettably, we're seeing the same situation take place again. Condoning such biased approaches does not do the Secretariat of the UN any favors. It is all the more unacceptable to directly and publicly take the side of those who seek to tarnish Syria's image while knowing how unfounded or at least dubious those accusations are. We cannot allow these distorted, politicized phrases and wording to seep into reports being published on behalf of the Secretary General of the UN. This is a matter of his personal authority and of the authority of the UN as a whole. We are concerned that the report once again contains accusatory paragraphs regarding outstanding issues regarding the initial declaration, especially since we have all heard and found out from the former OPCW Inspector Henderson during the 28 September ARIA formula meeting that the Technical Secretariat leadership is giving the mission to assess the initial declaration a direct instructions to keep those issues open. Syrians will never be able to close those issues with such an approach. I would also like to recall that according to the same expert, many states with chemical weapons at the point when they joined the OPCW and submitted their applications had the same problems. However, in those cases, they were interpreted as insignificant drawbacks that did not allow to accept the declaration as a whole. So we are seeing a biased approach that the Technical Secretariat is taking with respect to Damascus. And why is the UN Secretariat participating in these political games? Moreover, it's unclear on what basis Western delegations are in general trying to initiate a detailed discussion of the Syrian Initial Declaration. Hague has the prerogative to discuss this platform, and the information provided by states as part of their initial declaration is strictly confidential. It should not be discussed publicly, and especially not in New York. This looks like yet another clumsy attempt to catch Syria red-handed somehow. The fact-finding mission reports on the incidents in Aleppo in 2018 and Sarakip in 2016 is another testament to the double standards being used by the Technical Secretariat. Those documents were prepared only after our repeated and urgent insistences, and while that was happening for over a year, both we and the Syrian party were bombarded with requests for new information. Something was supposedly constantly lacking, new unsurmountable issues emerged for the Technical Secretariat, samples were lost, and we at some point even grew tired of trying to prove that we had transmitted all the materials. Why did investigating those incidents take so long and become so complicated? Perhaps it was because the accusations of using chemical weapons in those instances were against the opposition and not the Syrian army. Of course, we have no illusions that the fact-finding mission will show a principled, unbiased approach. It was not able to establish the fact of the use of those weapons by opposition groups. There was no need for the Technical Secretariat to even pretend that it was carrying out an investigation. They should have immediately published the outcome and admitted that they refused to even consider a scenario where the opposition could have used chemical weapons. The insistent line being used by Western colleagues to use accusations on the chemical dossier in order to punish inconvenient countries is something that we're seeing everywhere. Just yesterday, in the first committee, a extremely politicized and confrontational resolution on the OPCW was adopted. Once upon a time, that document was truly consensus-based and truly sought to strengthen the integrity of the organization. Now it has lost its initial meaning and it has become another biased instrument to push through sanctions by the West. What is most telling is the addition of a paragraph to that resolution regarding an incident with the Russian blogger Navalny. During the general debate in the first committee, we asked the German party a number of specific questions regarding that matter and requested clarifications. However, no response followed. The paradigm of highly likely doesn't provide for answers to questions or citing facts. Instead of a direct and frank conversations, our Western colleagues are pretending as though Russia's fault has already been proven. And we're seeing this tactic in its full form as we have previously seen it regarding the Skripal incident. I would like to ask a direct question to my Western colleagues. Do you understand what your actions have already led to? We're seeing increasingly dangerous symptoms, if not a metastasis of the same dangerous disease. And that disease is a large-scale crisis of trust in the OPCW. The impact of this scandal is beginning to be seen far beyond the organization. This isn't any longer a matter of criticizing certain specific investigations. It's a systematic problem without which It is impossible to talk about any sort of proper functioning of the OPCW or trust towards the organization. We have a critical mass of questions to its technical secretariat and its leadership. There are too many signs and bits of evidence of machinations and manipulations its report to ignore. Let me remind you that our criticism of the FFM report on the Han Shikun incident in April 2017 was ignored. Even though there was multiple evidence that it was staged, we also did not receive any explanations regarding machinations with the reports on the Duma incident in 2018, nor did a response follow from the Director General about how they intend to combat the violations that were uncovered. Specific questions posed to OPCW leadership by Theodore Postel, Aaron Mate, and Jan Henderson during the ARIA formal meeting have not been responded. There is complete silence with regards to the facts voiced in the statement of Mr. Bustani, whom our Western colleagues attempted to hush up. That is why Russia continues to insist on discussing these topics in an open format, and we're pleased that we're able to do this for the third time, even though our colleagues are trying to prevent this every time behind the scenes. As we've repeatedly said, in our view, neither Syria nor, as we would hope, any member of the Security Council should have anything to hide from the international community. Regrettably, it is telling that the Director General of the OPCW is not taking part in today's meeting, even though Western delegations openly spoke about the importance of his participation during our previous meeting. Those were the very arguments that they used last time to create hysterics around our proposal to invite former Director General Mr. Bustani. A month has gone by, and we're still waiting for an open briefing by Mr. Arias. If OPCW leadership does, in fact, have no violations when it comes to the Syrian chemical dossier, and it is acting in a professional and unbiased manner, as Western delegations claim, then they should have nothing to fear. OPCW leadership should be the most interested in providing public explanations regarding criticism in its address. If that criticism is unfounded, let them provide counter-arguments. Attempts to evade the conversation just create the impression that OPCW leadership does in fact have something to hide. We hope that at the very least in December, Director General Arias will muster the courage to answer the pile of questions toward him. I'll say this outright. We have a huge number of sub-questions, and we don't see any point in asking them in a closed meeting. The time has long gone when we could allow ourselves a purely technical discussion of the Director General's reports about the implementation of Resolution 2118. What's at stake today is the authority, integrity, and further fate of the OPCW itself. As long as its systematic problems are unresolved, that plays into the hands of those who take advantage of impunity and use chemical weapons incidents to create provocations. Like all members of the international communities, Russia is committed to the purposes of the OPCW and non-proliferation of chemical weapons in general. That is why we continue to fight for objective investigations and actively oppose disinformation and outright lies. Thank you.
I thank the Russian Federation for its statement, and